The small repair bay was quiet except for the faint hum of old machines. Daniel sat on the floor with tools spread around him, his hands deep inside the engine of a broken cargo hauler. The space station outside the hangar walls was almost asleep. Only a few ships moving slowly through the dark vacuum. He preferred these late-night shifts, no noisy customers. No supervisors breathing down his neck, only the steady sound of his own work. But tonight, something felt different. It started with a sound, not the usual metallic creak of the hangar doors or the soft hiss of leaking air valves. This was faint, soft, almost like fingernails scratching on metal. Daniel froze, his wrench still in his hand. His eyes moved toward the far corner of the hangar where piles of broken crates sat stacked like a wall. The sound came again, a slow scrape, then silence. He set his wrench down and walked quietly toward the noise. His boots made the metal floor ring softly, and he found himself holding his breath without thinking. The air smelled faintly of oil and cold metal, the same as always, but now there was something else, the feeling of being watched when he reached the crates. He crouched down and peered between them. Two wide, glowing eyes stared back at him. The figure was small, hidden in shadow. Her skin was pale silver, her hair messy and tangled, and her clothes looked torn and dirty. She pressed her back against the crate as if trying to vanish into it. Daniel blinked, surprised. He had seen many alien species in his years working here, but never one quite like her. "Hey," he whispered. "Are you lost?" She shook her head quickly, almost too quickly. Her eyes darted toward the dark hallway behind the hangar door. Her voice came out as a whisper, trembling. "Please, don't tell them I'm here." "Tell who?" Daniel asked, his voice low. But before she could answer, a sharp sound echoed from the hallway, the heavy clack of boots on metal. Slow, but getting closer, the girl flinched, curling into herself. Daniel looked toward the door, his heartbeat quickening. Whoever was coming. She clearly didn't want them to find her. The hangar doors slid open with a hiss, and three tall figures stepped inside. Their armor was dark red, their helmets hiding their faces. Each carried a scanning device in one hand and a weapon in the other. The one in front spoke with a voice that was calm but cold. "Human mechanic. We are looking for someone. Fugitive. Have you seen a young female of non-human origin in this area?" Daniel glanced at the crates, then back at them. He could feel the girl's gaze on him. He didn't know her story, and yet something in him didn't want to hand her over. "No," he said, shaking his head. "Haven't seen anyone but ships and scrap all night." The leader narrowed his eyes behind the visor. The scanner in his hand beeped faintly. But he ignored it and stepped closer to Daniel. "If you are lying, you will share her fate," he said slowly. "She is dangerous." Daniel forced himself to meet the alien's gaze. "So are most people who are being hunted," he replied, trying to sound casual. The alien stared at him for another long moment, then turned away. "We'll be watching," he said before. Leaving, the other two followed him, and the hangar door slid shut again. Silence returned, but this time it was heavy. Daniel turned back to the crates. The girl was still there, her eyes wide. She didn't move until he crouched down again. "You want to tell me what that was about?" he asked. She hesitated, her lips pressing together like she was holding back words. Her voice was barely audible. You don't know, do you?" "Know what?" Daniel frowned, but she didn't answer. Instead, she just stared at him, like she was trying to solve a puzzle only she could see. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I don't know who you are or what trouble you're in. But if those guys are going to keep looking for you, you can't stay here." Her gaze flicked toward the hallway again, fear still in her eyes. Then she looked back at him and whispered, "If I stay, they'll kill me. If I run, maybe I live. Maybe." Daniel said slowly, "But you won't get far without help." Her expression shifted, a tiny flicker of something like hope passing across her face. "Will you help me?" She asked. Daniel almost said no. He had no reason to get involved. But something about the way she asked, quiet, certain, almost like she already knew the answer, made him hesitate. He looked at her again, really looked at the dirt smudged on her face, the torn edges of her sleeves, the way her hands trembled even though she was trying to hide it. She was young, maybe barely into adulthood for her species. And whatever her story was, it had left her alone and hunted. Boots echoed faintly in the distance again, this time further away, but enough to make her tense. Daniel made his decision. "All right, come on," he said, standing and holding out his hand. For a moment, she didn't move. Her eyes stayed on his hand like she was testing if it was a trap. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her cold, trembling fingers in his. Daniel pulled her up and led her toward the back of the hangar, away from the main door, toward a side entrance that led to his personal repair shuttle. He didn't know why he was doing this, didn't know who she was or why anyone wanted her dead, but he could feel it. This was the start of something big, something dangerous, something he couldn't walk away from. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a question was already forming, one he would ask her soon. Why me? The hangar's side door slid open with a quiet hiss. Daniel stepped into the dim corridor, guiding the girl ahead of him. She stayed close, her head low, eyes flicking left and right as if she expected an attack at any moment. The air here was colder, carrying the faint scent of recycled oxygen and engine fumes. They reached the small docking ring where his repair shuttle waited. The craft was old, patched together from spare parts, but it was reliable. Daniel pressed his hand to the control pad and the hatch opened with a metallic sigh. He motioned her inside. She hesitated for a moment before stepping through, her movements careful, like someone who had never trusted a door in her life. Once inside, Daniel sealed the hatch. "All right," he said, trying to keep his tone steady. "You can tell me now who those guys were." She stood in the center of the shuttle's narrow cabin, her hands gripping the straps of her torn satchel. "They are the Blood Guard," she said softly. "They serve the council that took my family's place." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Council? You mean government?" She nodded. "They were once our protectors. Now they are my hunters." Before he could ask more, the cum system crackled to life. A voice spoke in a harsh, alien tongue, then switched to galactic common. "Attention all vessels in this sector. A dangerous fugitive is on the loose. All ships are to report any unknown passengers immediately. Harboring her will result in execution." The girl's eyes widened, and she took a step closer to him. "They will search every dock, every bay," she whispered. "If we stay, we die." Daniel didn't argue. He slid into the pilot's seat and began warming up the shuttle's engines. The hum filled the cabin, a sound he had always found comforting. Now, it felt like a clock ticking down to something inevitable, as the shuttle detached from the docking ring. Daniel kept the lights dim, gliding away from the station in the shadow. Of larger cargo vessels, the stars stretched out ahead like an endless field of silver. The girl sat in the co-pilot's seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "So," Daniel said after a long silence, "where do you want to go?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at him, her gaze intense. "Anywhere they cannot follow." Daniel gave a short laugh without humor. "Out here. There's no such place." Her expression didn't change. "Then we make one. Something." In the way she said it made him glance at her again. She wasn't just running for her life. There was something else. A weight behind her words. They passed the edge of the station's scanning range. Daniel adjusted their course toward the asteroid belt. The dense rocks would hide them from most patrol sweeps. But even as he steered, he could feel her watching him. Finally, he turned to her. You still haven't told me why they want you dead." She shifted in her seat, her voice quieter now. "Because I am the last of the royal line. If I live, they fear my people will rise again. If I die, the hope dies with me." Daniel stared at her. Royal line. "You mean you're a princess?" she finished for him. Though there was no pride in her tone, only exhaustion. "But titles mean nothing when you are alone." He leaned back in his seat, processing the words, "And you came to me because—" Her eyes softened, almost like she pitied him. "Because you're not like the others. Humans are not bound to the council's chains. You can choose." Daniel shook his head. "I'm just a mechanic. I fix broken things." She tilted her head slightly. "Then fix me." Before he could reply, the proximity alarm blared. The display lit up with 3 red markers: incoming ships. Closing fast, Daniel cursed under his breath. "They must have tracked us." The girl's voice was steady. "Then we run." Daniel slammed the throttle forward. The shuttle shot into the asteroid field. Weaving between massive spinning rocks, plasma bolts streaked past, some exploding against the asteroids in bursts of blue fire. The entire cabin shook with each near miss. "Hold on," Daniel shouted, pulling hard on the controls. The shuttle scraped against a jagged surface, sparks spraying across the viewport. He could hear the hiss of atmosphere leaking from somewhere in the hull. The girl moved without hesitation, grabbing the emergency sealant kit and patching the breach while the ship still spun through the field. Her hands moved fast, steady, like someone used to working under fire. Daniel noticed. "You've done this before." She didn't look up. "And you've flown through worse." He gritted his teeth. "No, I haven't." She gave him that same strange smile she'd worn back in the hangar. "Yes, you have. You just don't remember." The words lodged in his mind, distracting him for a split second. A plasma bolt grazed the wing, sending the shuttle spinning. He fought the controls, leveling out just in time to see the enemy ships pull back, unwilling to risk deeper pursuit into the unstable field. Silence fell again, broken only by the rumble of the engines. Daniel slowed the shuttle, guiding it toward the shelter of a massive asteroid hollow. Once inside, he powered down to minimal systems, hiding from scanners. The girl sat back in her seat, breathing evenly, as if the chase had barely rattled her. Daniel studied her in the dim light. "All right," he said finally. "What's going on here? You keep looking at me like you know me." Her voice was calm, but there was something deep in it now. "Because I do," she said. "You just don't know it yet." Daniel didn't respond. Not because he didn't want to, but because he suddenly wasn't sure he wanted the answer. The hollow inside the asteroid was cold and silent. Shadows stretched across the shuttle's metal walls, and the only sound was the faint hum of the emergency systems. Daniel sat in the pilot's seat, his hands resting on the controls, but his eyes fixed on the alien girl. She sat across from him, her knees pulled close, her silver hair falling over her face. He wanted to ask her 100 questions, but instead, he said the simplest one. "You said you know me. How?" She didn't look up right away. Instead, she traced a faint crack on the shuttle's wall with her fingertip. "Because 20 years ago, you saved my mother." Daniel frowned. "That's impossible. I wasn't even born 20 years ago." She finally raised her gaze to meet his, and in the dim light, her eyes seemed to catch their own glow. "Not in your time," she said softly. "In mine." Daniel leaned back, confused. "That doesn't make any sense." "It will," she replied. "But first, we have to leave this place. The Blood Guard will search the asteroid field soon." Daniel hesitated. He didn't like running blind, but something in her voice carried a quiet certainty that made him uneasy. He powered the engines up just enough to move, slipping the shuttle deeper into the asteroid belt. The rocks drifted, slowly turning in the black void, their surfaces scarred by centuries of impacts. The girl moved to the co-pilot seat. "There's a safe route through here," she said, pointing to a cluster of tight passages. "If we take it, we can reach." The shadow side of the belt. Before they scanned this sector, Daniel shot her a look. "You've been through here before." Her lips curved slightly. "With you?" He gripped the controls tighter. "You keep saying things like that, but I would remember." "You will," she murmured. And then focused on the navigation display, guiding him through narrow gaps between jagged asteroid cliffs. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The light from distant stars was swallowed by the massive rock walls. The shuttle's external lights barely cut through the shadows. Daniel kept his eyes on the sensors, but something about this place made him feel watched. Halfway through the route, the scanner gave a sharp ping. "We've got movement," Daniel said, adjusting the view. A small, sleek craft was trailing them at a distance. No weapons visible, but its movements were deliberate. The girl's expression changed, tightening. "That's not Bloodguard." She said, "That's worse." Daniel gave her a sharp look. "Define worse." "They're hunters," she said, "paid to find me before anyone else can, if they catch us." "They won't kill me quickly," Daniel muttered under his breath, and pushed the throttle forward. The shuttle surged ahead. Weaving through the twisting path, the hunter ship followed, matching every turn. Its sleek frame allowed it to slip through the rocks with ease, closing the distance. The girl suddenly leaned over and tapped a blinking icon on the console. "Here," she said, "take the tunnel ahead. It will look too small, but the wall is hollow." Daniel's instinct screamed that it was a bad idea. But he trusted her enough to try. He angled the shuttle toward a crack in the rock barely wider than the ship itself. The walls scraped the hull as they entered, sparks flying outside the viewport. The tunnel twisted sharply, and Daniel fought the controls to keep from smashing into the jagged stone. The girl's hand shot out to steady herself, gripping the back of his seat. Then the tunnel opened into a cavern, massive and dark, the walls glittering faintly with veins of some unknown mineral. Daniel powered down again, letting the shuttle drift to a stop behind a massive boulder. The hunter craft streaked past the tunnel entrance, missing them entirely. Daniel exhaled slowly, his grip on the controls loosening. The girl stepped closer to the viewport, her voice quieter now. "This place. It's older than the Council. Some say it was carved by machines older than any race we know." Daniel glanced at her. "How do you know all this?" She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Because you told me. Once." He shook his head. "I think you've got me mixed up with someone else." "No," she said firmly. "I'm sure. You saved my mother when the Bloodguard first rose. You flew a ship that no one else could pilot. You fought like you had lived 1,000 battles. And before you disappeared, you told her one thing, that if her bloodline was ever hunted, she should find you." Daniel stared at her, trying to decide if she was lying, insane, or telling a truth so strange he couldn't accept it. Before he could speak, the proximity alarm beeped again. But this time, it wasn't from outside. The signal was coming from deep inside the asteroid itself, a slow, rhythmic pulse. The girl's eyes widened. "It's here," she whispered, almost to herself. Daniel frowned. "What's here?" She turned to him, her voice trembling but determined. "The ship you left behind." Daniel stared at her, the dim light casting sharp shadows across her pale face. "The ship I left behind." He repeated, his voice low. "I've never been here before." She stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "Not in this life," she said, "but it's yours. It always has been." Before Daniel could argue, the rhythmic pulse on the scanner grew louder, a steady beat like a heart deep inside the rock. It was coming from somewhere within the cavern, echoing faintly through the shuttle's hull. The girl turned toward the noise, her expression strangely calm. "Follow it," she said. Daniel hesitated, his instincts warning him that nothing good could come from chasing ghost signals inside an asteroid. But there was something in her voice, a certainty that pulled at him. He eased the shuttle forward, weaving between massive stone pillars. The light from the console painted the walls in soft green and blue. As they moved deeper, the cavern narrowed into a long passage. The scanner's pulse grew stronger, each beat sending a faint vibration through the controls. Daniel's fingers tightened on the sticks. "Whatever's ahead," he said. "It's still active." She nodded slowly. "It's waiting for you." The tunnel widened suddenly, revealing an underground hangar carved into the asteroid itself. The walls were lined with smooth, ancient metal instead of stone. And in the center, half buried in shadow, was a ship unlike any Daniel had ever seen. It was massive but sleek, its hull black with faint silver patterns that seemed to shift when you looked at them too long. The shape was alien, but not from any species he recognized, and though it looked abandoned, faint blue lines of energy pulsed along its surface in time with the scanner's beat. Daniel's breath caught. "What is that?" The girl's voice was soft, almost reverent. "It's called the Eidolon. You built it." He laughed once, shaking his head. "Yeah, right. I can barely keep this shuttle from falling apart." She didn't smile. Not now, but once before. "The council rose before the Blood Guard hunted my family. You were the pilot, the engineer, and the warrior who forged that ship with your own hands. You vanished after the last battle, and we thought you were gone forever." Daniel felt a strange pull toward the dark vessel. Like it was a memory buried too deep to reach, he steered the shuttle closer. The hull of the Eidolon towering over them like the shadow of some great beast. The girl moved to the airlock, her hand hovering over the release. "It will open for you," she said. He frowned. How would it? A deep, metallic groan cut through the silence. The Eidolon's massive ramp began to lower slowly, dust and fragments of rock falling from its edges. Daniel froze, his mind racing. He hadn't touched a single control. The girl stepped onto the ramp without hesitation, the soft glow of the ship's internal lights spilling out and washing over her silver skin. Daniel followed cautiously, his boots clanging against the ancient metal. Inside, the air was cool and dry, the walls lined with strange panels covered in symbols he didn't understand. Yet, as he walked deeper, his hands brushed along the controls. Like he knew exactly where they were, his steps slowed. A strange familiarity creeping into his thoughts, his pulse matched the ship's steady rhythm. The girl watched him closely. "Do you feel it?" she asked. Daniel stopped, his fingers resting on a circular panel in the center of the control deck. "It's like I've been here before," he admitted quietly, "but I can't remember when." She stepped closer, her voice low. "That's because your memories were taken, not stolen by time, but erased. They didn't want you to remember what you were, because if you did, you would be unstoppable." Daniel looked at her sharply. "Who's they?" "The same ones who want me dead," she said. "The council fears this ship. They fear you." A sudden warning tone echoed through the Eidolon's corridors. Daniel turned to the console and saw the display flicker to life. Red markers flooding the screen, Blood Guard ships entering the asteroid belt. The girl's voice was steady. "They found us." Daniel's instincts flared, his hands moving across the unfamiliar controls without thought. The ship responded instantly. Lights brightening, engines humming deep in the hull like a giant waking from a long sleep. "How do I even fly this thing?" Daniel asked, even as his fingers adjusted settings he didn't consciously understand. "You already know," she said simply, sliding into the co-pilot's chair. "You just have to trust yourself." The hangar shook as the first enemy blasts hit the outer rock. Dust rained from the ceiling. Daniel looked at her. "Once we leave here, there's no going back." She met his gaze, her voice calm but fierce. There was never any going back. With that, Daniel pushed the controls forward. The Eidolon roared to life. Lifting off the hangar floor, the ramp sealed behind them, and the walls of the asteroid split open as ancient mechanisms tore a path into the black void. Outside, the Blood Guard ships turned toward them, weapons charging. Daniel's grip tightened on the controls. The girl's voice was steady. "Show them who you are." The void opened before them, vast and endless. The Eidolon surged from the asteroid hangar like a predator released from a cage. Its engines were silent to the ear, but deep enough in vibration that Daniel could feel them in his bones. Outside, the black was broken by flashes of red, the Blood Guard ships closing in. Daniel's eyes darted across the control panels, glowing with alien symbols he should not have been able to read. And yet, his hands moved with certainty, flipping switches, adjusting power flows, like muscle memory from a life he didn't remember. "They're spreading into attack formation," the girl said from the co-pilot seat. Her voice calm despite the danger. "I see them," Daniel muttered. The scanners showed 3 ships in front, to circling wide to cut off escape. Their weapons lit up with charging energy. "Shields?" she asked. Daniel's fingers hovered over the console, and without thinking, he tapped a series of runes. A deep thrum rolled through the ship, the hull shimmering faintly. "Up," he said, surprised at how natural it felt. The first volley hit a storm of red plasma bolts. They splashed against the Eidolon's shield like pebbles on water. The girl leaned forward, studying the readouts. "They won't stop. They'll keep firing until they break through." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we hit back." Without waiting for her reply, he angled the Eidolon into a sharp dive. The massive ship moving with impossible grace for its size. The enemy fire streaked past overhead, and in that same instant, Daniel's hands found the weapon controls. Twin beams of blue light lanced from the Eidolon's wings, slicing through one of the Blood Guard ships before it could adjust its course. The vessel split apart in silence, debris scattering into the void. The girl glanced at him, not with shock, but with something else. "Recognition, you see?" "You've done this before." Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. The way his body moved, the way his eyes tracked the enemy, the way his mind calculated angles and velocity without effort, it was as if he had never stopped. The remaining ships swarmed in, weaving between asteroid fragments. Daniel twisted the Eidolon through the chaos, skimming so close to the rocks that the hull almost scraped. The pursuing ships tried to follow, but the Eidolon's turns were too sharp, too precise. "They can't match your maneuvers," the girl said, watching the display. "Then let's make it harder for them." Daniel replied. He darted the ship toward a cluster of spinning asteroid shards, flipping a switch that caused the Eidolon's energy lines to flare brighter. The asteroids around them trembled, shifting unnaturally. Daniel realized the ship was pulling at them with some kind of gravitational field. He swung the Eidolon sharply and released the pull, sending the massive rocks hurtling into the enemy ships. One was crushed instantly, the other clipped and sent spiraling, but the 2 flanking ships closed in, cutting off the escape route. Daniel felt the pressure, his mind racing. "They'll box us in," the girl warned. Unless we don't play their game," Daniel finished, already diving toward the lower edge of the belt. The enemy followed, firing wildly. Daniel brought the Eidolon close to a massive asteroid, its surface glowing faintly with volcanic heat. "They'll think we're trying to hide," he said. Flipping another unfamiliar control, the ship's outer hull shimmered, and suddenly, they were gone from the scanners. The girl's eyes widened, cloaking. Daniel smirked. "Guess so." The enemy ships swept past, searching. Unaware that the Eidolon now sat silent in the asteroid's shadow, Daniel waited, his hands steady, his breathing slow. When the enemy looped back around, he dropped the cloak and fired all weapons at once. The lead ship was torn apart in a burst of light. The last Bloodguard vessel tried to retreat, but Daniel's aim was unerring. The blue beams cut through its engines, sending it drifting powerless into the black. The silence after the battle felt heavier than the fight itself. The girl sat back, her gaze fixed on him. "Now, do you believe me?" she asked softly. Daniel kept his hands on the controls, staring out at the wreckage. "I don't know what to believe. You don't have to," she said. "Not yet. But you can't deny what you just did." He turned to look at her. "And what exactly did I just do?" Her voice was calm, but there was something deep in it. "You reminded the galaxy why they fear you." Daniel felt a chill crawl down his spine. Not from the cold, but from the way her words settled into him. They didn't feel like flattery. They felt like truth before he could respond. The long-range scanner chimed. A new set of signals appeared. Larger, slower, but many. The girl leaned in, her voice tightening. "They'll send more, stronger ones next time. We need to get to my world before they block the hyperspace lanes." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Then you'd better tell me why your world is worth all this trouble." She met his eyes, her expression unreadable. "Because if we fail, it won't just be my people who die. It will be yours too." The hyperspace lanes stretched ahead. A faint silver thread against the endless black, the Eidolon cruised through the void, its engines whispering like a steady heartbeat. Daniel sat in the pilot's chair, but his attention kept drifting to the alien girl beside him. She hadn't spoken in several minutes, her gaze fixed on the stars, her fingers resting lightly. On the console, he finally broke the silence. "You said if we fail, my people die too. Explain?" She didn't look at him right away. Instead, she closed her eyes for a moment, as if searching for the right place to begin. "The Bloodguard are not just soldiers of the Council," she said slowly. "They are part of something older. Something that existed before the Council itself. They are the hunters for a force we call the Veil." Daniel frowned. "Never heard of it." "You wouldn't have," she replied, "because your kind has been kept in the dark. The Veil has one purpose: to remove any race that grows too strong. They do it quietly, over decades, until an entire civilization is gone." He turned toward her, his voice low. "And you think humans are next?" She met his gaze, her eyes steady. "I don't think, I know. It has already begun." Daniel's grip tightened on the controls. "How?" She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small device. Its surface cracked and scorched when she pressed it. A faint hologram flickered into the air. Star maps, human colonies marked in blue, but many of those marks were crossed out, replaced with faint red symbols. "These are your outer colonies," she said, her voice quiet. "One by one, they are being erased. Your people think it's disease, famine, resource collapse. But it's not. The Veil moves carefully, using the Bloodguard to weaken worlds before wiping them clean." Daniel stared at the map. Recognizing several of the lost colonies, he had repaired ships from those regions, heard rumors of their decline. But he had never believed the worst. Now the evidence was glowing in front of him. "Why tell me this now?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. "Because you are the only one who can stop them," she said. Without hesitation, he shook his head. "I'm a mechanic, not a hero." "You are not just a mechanic," she said firmly, leaning closer. "You are the same warrior who once led fleets against the Veil. You are the one they couldn't kill, so they took your memories instead. They hid you among your own people, hoping you would fade into nothing. But I found you before they could finish what they started." Daniel felt a mix of disbelief and unease. Her words were impossible, yet everything about her tone told him she believed them completely. And worse, a small part of him was beginning to believe them too. He turned back to the viewport, his voice low. If what you're saying is true, why not go to someone else? Someone who remembers. Her reply was soft, but it hit him harder than a shout, because there is no one else. They are all dead. The silence that followed was heavy. Only the hum of the eidolon filled the cabin. Daniel finally asked, "What happens if I walk away?" She didn't hesitate. "The veil will reach Earth within 20 years, maybe less. You might live long enough to see it burn, but your children won't." Daniel's hands tightened on the controls. His mind flashed to Earth. The crowded streets, the laughter in city markets. The quiet comfort of knowing home still existed somewhere. He imagined it gone, replaced with the cold emptiness of space. He didn't like that image. The girl watched him, her voice gentler now. "You asked me why you This is the answer, because you are the only one who has beaten them before, and because I cannot do it alone." Daniel looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You really believe I'm the same man from 20 years ago?" "I don't believe," she said. "I know," before Daniel could respond. The eidolon's console flashed with a proximity alert. He tapped the controls, expecting more Bloodguard ships, but the reading was different. Something massive was ahead. A shadow began to take shape in the void, blocking out the stars. At first, Daniel thought it was a moon, but as the ship drew closer, the surface rippled with lines of faint light, moving in slow, deliberate patterns. The girl's expression turned grim. "It's one of the Veil's sentinels." Daniel's voice was tight. "And what does that mean?" "It means," she said, her eyes locked on the looming shape, "they already know we're coming." The eidolon's engines hummed deeper. As if the ship itself sensed the threat, Daniel's pulse quickened. He had survived the Bloodguard. But this felt different. Bigger, colder, older, and for the first time, a thought crossed his mind that he didn't want to admit. Maybe she was right about everything. The shadow of the Veil Sentinel swallowed the stars. It hung in the void like a silent fortress, its vast surface pulsing with faint streams of light that seemed to flow like veins. Daniel had seen massive warships before, but this was different. This thing didn't look built. It looked grown, ancient, alive in a way that made the back of his neck tighten. The girl's voice was low, almost reverent. "They are the eyes and ears of the Veil. When a sentinel marks you, you can run, but you will never escape." Daniel's hands hovered over the eidolon's controls. "So we don't run," he said. His voice steady, but his chest tight. Her eyes widened slightly. "You would fight it." In this state, Daniel didn't answer. He didn't have to. The eidolon responded to his will before he even moved, its power lines flaring brighter. The hum in the deck deepened, vibrating through his bones. He felt the controls shift subtly. Under his hands, as if the ship was aligning itself with him, the Sentinel stirred. Its great form rotating slowly, a slit along its surface opened, revealing a core of blinding white light. The sensors screamed energy readings far beyond anything Daniel had seen. "They're charging a purge beam," the girl warned. "One hit will strip the hull, shields or no shields." Daniel's eyes locked on the glowing core. His hands moved across the console with impossible speed. Weapons cycling, engines spooling to maximum. He didn't know how he knew the sequences, but each movement felt like muscle memory. The eidolon surged forward, weaving in a tight spiral toward the Sentinel. Enemy fire lanced out in beams of searing light, each one missing by meters, as Daniel pushed the ship into turns so sharp they should have torn the hull apart. "You're flying," like the girl began, but stopped herself. Instead, gripping the co-pilot's seat, her silver hair whipping around her face from the vibration. "Like what?" Daniel almost asked, but there was no time. The Sentinel's core flared again, the beam moments away from firing. He dove the eidolon straight toward it, closing the distance faster than its great size should have allowed at the last instant. Daniel fired the main cannons in a concentrated burst. The blue energy slammed into the Sentinel's core, and for a moment the light faltered. The massive ship shuddered. "Not enough," the girl said. "Reading the output, it will recover. In seconds." "Then we hit harder," Daniel replied, flipping a control he hadn't noticed before. The Eidolon's forward section shifted, armor plates folding back to reveal a strange, glowing structure, like a heart made of crystal and fire. The girl's eyes widened. "That's the Eidolon lance. You've unlocked it?" The ship thrummed as power built in the core. The Sentinel seemed to sense the threat, its beam charging faster. The two titans aimed at each other, the void between them trembling with energy. "Fire," she said. Her voice fierce, Daniel did. The Eidolon's lance erupted in a spear of white-blue energy, tearing across the void. It met the Sentinel's beam in a blinding collision that lit the darkness for thousands of kilometers. For a moment, the two forces fought, grinding against each other until the lance pushed through. Striking the Sentinel's core directly, the explosion was silent in space, but the shockwave rattled the Eidolon. Pieces of the Sentinel drifted away like burning leaves, its light fading into nothing. Silence returned. But it was a different kind, not the emptiness of before, but the breathless stillness after a storm. Daniel leaned back in the pilot's seat, his hands loosening from the controls. The girl stared at him, her chest rising and falling. "Now," she said softly, "do you understand why it had to be you?" Daniel met her gaze, still catching his breath. "Why me? Why me?" he asked again, not as a challenge, but almost as a plea. She didn't look away. Her voice was steady, but there was something raw in it, "Because you were the only one who ever stood between the veil and the galaxy. Because 20 years ago, you didn't just save my mother, you saved me. I was a child in her arms when you fought your last battle. And I never forgot your face. I swore if you ever returned, I would find you." Daniel felt the weight of her words settle deep inside him. He wanted to deny it, to say she had mistaken him for someone else. But deep down, the way his hands had moved, the way the ship had answered him, the way he'd felt in the fight, it told him she was right. She leaned closer, her eyes locking with his. "You once saved my people," she said, her voice a whisper now, "and now, you are my people." For a moment, neither of them moved. The stars turned slowly beyond the viewport, and the wreckage of the Sentinel drifted away into the black, somewhere inside him. Daniel knew this wasn't the end, it was only the first step back toward a war he'd already fought once, but this time he wasn't running from it.